Okay, you happy for me to start?
Yep, we're recording.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Jeremy. And thank you, everybody, for attending today. My name's Janine Price, and I work for Scalexia and have been involved in the project from a biosecurity and environmental regulation point of view. So today we'll be running through some researchers' results on the black soldier fly technology to convert agricultural waste. And just a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions, if you can put them in the Q&A tab in the top right with the two little bubble boxes with the question marks in them, if you can write anything in there, and then we will address them at the end of the presentations. We're also recording this, so if anyone's got any objections, if they could let us know, that would be fantastic. And to start us off, we're going to throw to Catherine Balding, who's from Baiada, who is representing the poultry industry, and she'll just give a really brief overview of why the industry was involved in the project. Thanks, Catherine.
Hey, thanks, Janine. And yeah, for those people that don't know me, I'm going to be wearing two hats. Yes, I am from Baiada, representing the poultry industry, but I'm also representing AgriFutures today as the chair of the chicken meat panel. So it's a real pleasure for me to be involved and representing AgriFutures on behalf of the project. It's a real compliment of the project that it is so collaborative across the industry over many different livestock sectors. And I think that collaborative approach is quite exciting and will hopefully result in the adoption of this technology in the future. Really, I think that the concept really has potential to displace a lot of the ingredients or products out there. And in terms of a sustainability footprint, to have a closed looped circularity in the food chain and to address a problem that's been, prevalent in the poultry industry, and I know other industries as well, into addressing our agricultural waste and finding a solution about it. Like it's a big tick for sustainability and it's a big tick for cost to our producers and to our to also our potential future planning within the regional areas on addressing this really problem that's existed from the beginning. So yeah, thank you, and I'm really excited to hear today's presentation and what this technology will bring to us.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And now Dr. Sasha Jenkins will just give a bit of a brief introduction to the project. Thanks, Sasha.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the project. Closing the loop, black soldier fly technology to convert agricultural waste. As we said, it's a collaborative project between industry, academia, consultancy and government. And along the bottom are all the partners that have been involved and contributed to this project. So this slide just provides an overview of the project and what the partners actually did, or the research partners did for each component. So at the bottom, Luke Wheat from Future Green Solutions, who we'll hear from in a minute. His main role was to optimize black soldier fly larva rearing on various different types of livestock wastes and to really maximize the reduction in waste we got. And he incredibly got up to 70 to 80% reduction in livestock waste in a very short time as well. So we'll hear a bit more about that in a minute. So when we feed the waste to the larva, we end up with two products or two co-products. We have the larvae themselves, and we also have the larva frass, which is essentially fly poo. So of the larva is very rich in fatty acids and proteins. The fatty acids can be extracted and used for other purposes, such as biodiesel and other components. It can also be used as a coating to add to the frass to slow the release of nitrogen down from it. The protein part of it, obviously because these flies have been fed on manure and other waste materials, it can't really go back into the food chain as a feed. So Dr. Matt Redding at DAF Queensland, we spent our time on this project developing larvae as a fertiliser, and we'll hear a little bit more about that later on. As I said, the other co-product from this product is the larva frass. The larva frass also has mineral nitrogen and a lot of carbon in it. So my team at UWA looked at developing this as either a soil fertiliser or improver. Dr. Marritt's team at UWA also looked at the economic and market analysis, and we'll hear a bit later from her. And then our other partners at Scalexia and DPERD, Janine Price team looked at the environmental and biosecurity risks. So obviously when we're doing this product, we don't want to produce co-products that pose a risk to environmental and biosecurity things. And also regulation. Regulation has a big issue around barriers to adoptions. We needed to look at that side of things. Finally, David Cook at DPERD, he looked at stable fly emergence in the frass product. So obviously, particularly in WA, big problem with some of the manures and applying it to land is this risk of a stable fly emergence. So it was really important to see if the frass posed or reduced that risk. So the overall objectives of the research are 5 things. So first of all, it's to develop the black soldier fly technology to produce a sustainable livestock waste management that basically rapidly reduces the volume of waste. And that's what Luke is going to discuss. The second part was to then develop those co-products, the larva and the protein, as tailored low-cost fertilizers and soil improvers, and to then quantify any biosecurity risks, environmental risks associated with applying them or in the actual production cycle. We also looked at investigating market potentials for these co-products. And finally, we looked at trying to overcome some of the barriers to adoption. Those are around biosecurity risks, environmental regulation, and also public perception. So the talk today will cover these aspects of the project. Over to Luke. Luke's going to provide a bit more information about how we actually develop black soldier fly technology to better manage livestock waste.
Thanks, Sasha. Presentation up. Sorry, bear with me. Okay, morning everybody, / afternoon, depending on where you're dialing in from. I'm Luke Wheat, founder and CEO of Future Grain Solutions. We're a commercial insect producer on the West Coast. First of all, quick acknowledgement of the traditional owners and the lands on which we operate. I'm calling in from Noongar Wadjup country in WA, which is Perth and the Swan Coastal Plain. And I'd also like to just echo Catherine's comments that this project has been widely collaborative across industry and research. And it's been a really fascinating project to see so much conversation across industry, and hopefully that kind of sets the benchmark for other projects moving forward. I think it's rare that we would have so many RDCs on a standalone project. So thanks to all of our partners for coming on board a few years ago when we flagged this with APL as the lead. So for those of you who don't know, what is a black soldier fly? So you've probably seen them around in nature without really understanding what they were. They're a wasp-like fly, typically solitary in nature. They do not bite and they don't feed in their adult form. So they're not known to be a pest or a disease vector. They're naturalised within Australia and not recognised by the department as a pest in any way, shape or form. They've been highly domesticated overseas for use as waste management and protein production. Okay, so a little bit about commercial insect farming. So much like the poultry industry, we are really farmers. And for those of you in the poultry industry and other livestock industries, having a look at this flow chart, there'll be a lot of similarities in what you do, in that we have production phases of our livestock and we have broodstock and rearing phases. Only difference being is that what we do is held under highly controlled environments. And we have hundreds of millions of livestock at any one moment. But in terms of the systems and processes and controls, we've got a lot of similarities with the livestock industries. So our business as usual at the moment is we deal with pre-consumer organic waste, and we convert that using the insects into high quality nutrition products for aquaculture, pet feed and livestock manufacturers. We supply other commercial farmers throughout Australia with seed stock in the form of eggs. And we also provide the frask, which is a really great soil amender for horticulture and broadacre. So our role in this project really was to take our lessons and our commercial understanding of the behaviour of insects and how they can convert organic waste streams into valuable products across to more problematic waste streams, if you like, in the agricultural sector, which included predominantly manures, but we also looked at abattoir waste and processing waste. So for the poultry industry, that might include egg waste for the layers, protein waste off the skimming lines and cleaning lines, and farm mortalities as well. So we looked at each industry as a standalone, and where relevant, we blended those waste streams based on the ratios that they were produced on farm. The challenge with some of these substrates, from kind of a physical property and digestibility standpoint, was that they were too wet, too dry, very low digestibility. The paunch in particular is extremely high in lignocellulose, which is indigestible for the larvae. But also, again, if we tie this back to the poultry industry, particularly broilers, which are housed on straw or wood chips, because the manures are blended with that in farm. We also had a lot of sort of very low or completely indigestible substrate within the manures, and a poor nutrient content overall. So low protein, very high ash content. And in regards to eggs, if you looked at those as a standalone, just too viscous, too wet, and probably too high fat and protein as a standalone diet. And so the mixing of multiple farm streams was important as we moved through the sort of iterations of our trials. So how do we adapt to these challenges? We're going to tap that by correcting the moisture, doing some physical pre-treatments to the substrates to get a better physical property or a physical, to make it a little bit more workable, if you like, for the insects to feed through. We looked at several substrate pre-treatments, which included enzymatic, biological and physical. And we increase the exposure time because of the low nutrient quality. It takes the larvae a little bit longer to get through it than what we're used to on the sort of higher valuable horticulture and food waste streams. But after several iterations, we did get the waste volume reduction in line with what we experience on those cleaner substrates that I spoke about. So typically across the board, we achieved around that 80% waste volume reduction in a very short window compared to composting, as well as a much reduced greenhouse gas odour. So the frass product that remains at the end is very friable and odourless compared to your raw or composted manures. You'll see that the two that were quite underperforming were the dairy accumulated solids. Accumulated solids are solids that have been stockpiled on farm and essentially composted. So those solids had been on the farm for 3 or 4 months, so there wasn't much nutrient left in there for the insects. And the paunch, again, which that high lignocellulose was a problem. But across the board, particularly in poultry and swine, we had really great results, and dairy on the fresh manure. So as a project outcomes are looking really, really favourable to adapt this technology across to manures in the agricultural industry. And Sasha and Matt and Marit will go into more detail on those project outcomes. But we've achieved significant rapid reduction in waste. We had trials done by the State Department of Agriculture over here, DPIRD, who trialled frass as a soil amendment in horticulture compared to raw poultry manures, which stable fly, which we have on the west coast, and I believe in some areas of the east coast, which are a pest fly. They're blood dependent for their mating and breeding, and so the female flies are biters and cause significant damage, millions of dollars worth of damage across horticulture, livestock, and cause all sorts of problems for adjacent residents. So they establish into raw manures and horticulture waste, and particularly where horticulture and livestock industries intersect, so that they have the availability of blood from livestock, and for the larval forms, the availability of raw manures and horticulture waste. When we tried those, the frass alongside the raw manures, we essentially eliminated, for all intents and purposes, the emergence and establishment of stable fly in horticultural operations using frass over raw manures, which was a really great outcome. The soil ameliorator, and again, Sasha will dive into a little bit more detail, as will Matt, had really clear growth benefits for numerous crops that we tried. It showed really great promise for increasing drought tolerance and stress. And so moving forward, I think, again, just to go back to the partnerships, it's been a really great collaboration. We've made some amazing partnerships on this, and it'd be good now to use this research as a foundation to launch, more commercial based relationships, but also some more detailed research on the areas where we think there's kind of more opportunity for growth and refinement. So on that, I'll hand back to you, Sasha. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just before you start, Sasha, just a quick reminder that if you've got any questions, please pose them in the Q&A tab, which is at the top of the screen.
Okay, so for this second part, I'm going to talk about is to really just focus now on the frass as we developed it as a soil amendment. So back to the slide. So the bit that I'm focusing on here is turning the larva into an organic fertilizer. The objectives of this component of the research was to develop the frass as a low-cost, tailored, slow-release granulated fertilizer or soil improver product that's both safe to handle and also to store, transport, and apply. The other thing we looked at was obviously to quantify any biosecurity or environmental risks associated with applying the frass. So we ran a series of pot and field trials, and we looked at species from horticulture, pasture, and grains. We ran some more soil incubation experiments, and these were really to sort of understand the frass and the mechanisms behind how the frass was benefiting the plants and the growth. We also looked at greenhouse gas emissions. We did a range of pathogen testing. We worked with David Cook to look at stable fly emergence when the manures had been, the frass had been applied to the field trials. And finally, we looked at whether we needed to further granulate the product or further process it in certain, depending on the feedstock that had gone into the feeding the flies and producing the frass. The key findings, obviously, Luke has already touched on how they reduced the volume of waste. So once they reduced the volume of waste, we then had to look at the frass. In terms of the first thing we looked at was the reduction in pathogens. And I think I've just got a little table here looking at the fecal coliform counts across a range of industries. So if we look at the poultry, both the broilers and the layers, we can see that the initial manure had quite a volume of fecal coliforms. And when we assessed the larvae that have fed on this manure type, we can see it's really greatly reduced there's hardly any in the larva. For both the frass, there is definitely a reduction in the coliform counts in the frass, more so with the layers than the broilers, but we are definitely getting a reduction in those fecal coliform counts. Now for the for the stable fly. So stable fly are a pest, and they are a nuisance fly, as we've already mentioned. What was really exciting about this is when we added the manure to, the frass to the field trials, is that we just didn't see anything, particularly in the rates that we'd normally recommend applying frass. So between 1 and 5 tonnes per hectare, there was literally no emergence. We did see a few flies emerge at higher application rates, but we wouldn't typically recommend these application rates at quite high levels. But even if we did, the rates are much, much lower than compared to just adding manure, manure poultry untreated alone. So yeah, significant reduction in stable fly, which is a huge finding. We then looked at, in our field trials and our pot trials, we looked at how much nutrient the actual frass could provide, and it does provide some nitrogen. It doesn't provide all the nitrogen that you need, so you will have to top up with mineral fertilizer, but it is reducing the amount of nitrogen that you need to add to soil, which is a significant result. So we can see here, this is our field trial. We've got a range of species. We've got the red clover, ryegrass, wheat, and canola at the bottom, and along the top we've got basically increasing rates of frass. So I think you can all see, as we increase the rates of frass application, we get higher yields and growth in the plant. One of the other exciting findings we found with this application of frass is it actually has this conditioning property. So it eliminates particularly soil acidity, so it raises the pH, and that's particularly important in WA because our soils are so acidic. The other thing we found is that it seems to improve the plant's tolerance of water stress. So under drought conditions, it seems to perform a lot better when it's had frass amended to it. And this little, so the second figure, picture, we've got basically one of our pot trials where we've been adding increasing concentrations of frass amendment. And we can see its response curve to drought. So all these plants have been droughted, but you can see as you add increasing amounts of frass, we get a much stronger response from the plant. It grows a lot better and we get a good production. So yes, the frass is definitely helping with water stress. Other key findings we found from our field trials, we looked at soil carbon, and we were increasing application rates of frass, as you see in the first figure here. On the left-hand side, there is an increase in carbon as we increase the amount of frass that you're adding. So it seems to be able to add carbon to the soil, which again is important, particularly for our soils because they're very low in carbon. We also saw a reduction in odour, greenhouse gas, and nutrient leaching. This middle figure shows nitrous oxide over time. What I want you to focus on is the blue circles, that's the manure treatment, and the yellow is the frass treatment that's been treated. This one's actually poultry, so we can see with under normal manure conditions we get a lot greenhouse gas produced, but when we've basically processed this through the black soldier fly technology, we've basically managed to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions almost by half in the frass treatment. A final thing we looked at was whether we needed to granulate the product, the frass product, to because it's quite bulky, to basically reduce the transportation cost. So this shows a picture of one of our granulated products. So there is that opportunity as well if you need to do that. And also we looked at pelletizing them as well. So what does it mean? So obviously improved waste management, a sustainable way to reduce this disposal, getting basically 80% reduction and quite rapidly as well. You also get increase in productivity and probability. So we've got generation of these new products, potential new markets for the farmers, but also reduction in on-farm costs such as waste management and fertilizer use if they are using, they are growing crops. Reduced biosecurity risks. So there is a definitely reduction in pathogens, a significant reduction in stable fly and other nuisance flies. And particularly in WA, this will help maintain, regain some of those markets, particularly the ones in the shires that are under the Stable Fly Ban Act, where we're not allowed to apply manures. Enhanced soil health. So aside from reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, we saw improvements in soil health. So there was soil carbon. There was some beneficial microbes we noticed. Plant obviously has some plant nutrition, it raised the soil pH and improved the water efficiency of the plant. So future research opportunities. So One of the things that was raised was when we spoke to some of the farmers was that some of them weren't interested in a fertilizer. So we could explore looking at the frass and the larva as a waste energy. It appears certainly from the literature as a good substrate for anaerobic digestion. And there are other products that could be also generated. There's a whole wealth of products you can get from black solder biotechnology. So you can tailor it for your particular needs, including bioplastics or cosmetics and biodiesel if that's how you want it to be. Further evaluation of the frass as a soil amendment. So that was a particularly exciting finding. We saw that it was really having this conditioning properties, and maybe it could be used more in rehabilitation, restoration, and getting marginal land back into production. And it could be a good carbon farming. And the other thing was really we need to do a full life cycle analysis in relation to greenhouse gas. We did see significant greenhouse gas reduction in the final products compared to the starting substrate, but we don't know about the whole production cycle with its reduction in greenhouse gas. So that would be useful, and then obviously in relation to carbon credits. And that's all I have to say on the frass. Now it's going to be over to Matt Redding to discuss turning the protein into fertilizer.
Hello all, hopefully you can hear me. Righto, so I'm Matt Redding, and I'm going to talk to you about our experimentation, sort of proof of concept work with using the larvae as a fertilizer. And hang on, I'll just click on the right thing. So I'm part of a team of people working on that nutrient cycling type of area here in my Department of Agriculture and Fisheries in Queensland, including Sheikh Rabi, Brianna Smith, Mando Navas and Tara Rogan. So the group in total includes soil scientists, biogeochemical experts, and mechatronic engineers. And you'll see that why that is once I show you the types of techniques we've been using. So the subtitle to this is that perhaps we can feed the soil microbes to synchronize nitrogen supply with plant needs in order to achieve improved nitrogen use efficiency. And one of the guiding principles in the long term for this type of research, as we've been involved with it, is the idea of synchronizing nitrogen supply with the requirements of the plants. So in general, conventional fertilizers like urea tend to have a very high intensity of availability initially, which is the red line on this graph. And that tends to tail away within the season to very low levels, and you get losses occurring. Whereas the plants themselves may be germinating in the paddock, growing as seedlings, and then getting to mature plants. And so the curve of N requirement tends to be almost the opposite of what conventional fertilizers supply without some very clever management. So what this means is that we tend to get about 40 to 60% of nitrogen use efficiency. So 40 to 60% of what's supplied ends up in the plant. And it can be as low in some Australian production systems in wet years as around about 15%. Techniques applied include laboratory studies with reaction vessels and microdialysis and online real-time gas analysis. You can see here one of these reaction vessels with some soldier fly larvae actually in that grey layer there, and a lot of fungal development, which is not a negative. It can be a positive. And then we do trials in our growth accelerator where we're able to scan the plants as frequently as we wish to assess their uptake on an almost daily basis if we want of the nutrient. And you can see an animation there of a crop growing in the 120 pots in the growth accelerator. And then, of course, in an associated project to this one, field trials, but that's always a tool in our range of techniques we apply. We try to go from lab scale right out to field trial scale with our investigations. So given that idea that we want to try to synchronize nitrogen supply with the plant's requirements, This is a quote from 2007 from a paper that I found really quite, has been a guiding principle actually ever since. So this inefficiency that I mentioned with regard to nitrogen use efficiency is a consequence of the uncoupling of the carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus cycles via the use of conventional, highly soluble fertilizer forms. This results in agricultural ecosystems being maintained in a state of leaky nutrient saturation. And that encapsulates much of the problem that agriculture has been working with. Many of the challenges in fertilizer use are related to that. So our sort of proposed solution is to feed the soil microbes first. And that's why materials like soldier fly larvae are so interesting. So elaborating on that idea, the concept we have is that by manipulating the ratios of carbon and nitrogen and the other nutrients, we can influence biomass development, we can generate biomass nutrient utilisation and release of nutrients into the soil environment. And so by providing a sparing excess of nitrogen above the average nutrient ratios of those soil microorganisms, we can enable N to be evolved at the available at the right time. And we can also make the systems resistant to leaching losses and runoff losses. So a few of these graphs I'm about to show are related to two projects, not just the black soldier fly project, but also some associated work that probably started a bit before this, but also has some connected ideas. And that's the Pilot to Paddock Smart Farming Partnership project. Okay. So this is a multivariate analysis graph that you really don't have to take too much notice of. The key here is that fertilizer layer carbon to nitrogen ratio is very closely related to the nitrogen uptake in the longer term from systems. Not the immediate N uptake, but that from a later harvest. So why is this ongoing nitrogen supply most related, of all the factors we investigated, to the soil carbon to nitrogen ratio? And in fact, I'll tell you now, those ratios range from about 8 up to over 13 for the soil carbon in that soil fertilizer zone. And we believe this result is because there's a sweet spot for soil microbes. Here we have a range of pots selected from the pot trial to represent as closely as possible the averages of those treatments. So these represent 5 or 6 pots in this growth accelerator trial. They've all had the same basal applications of all the other nutrients that they might need, but not nitrogen. The exception is, of course, the control has not had any nitrogen addition, but the other 3 pots have had exactly the same total N addition. We have a control, an organic product that is currently on the market, conventional urea, and our modification of that organic product. And you can see that while the control and the organic product are not performing particularly well, urea takes off immediately. But I want you to particularly notice that the slow overtaking of this product above urea. And it's that ongoing release and availability to plants in a leached environment. These pots were leached, which I think represents the success of what we've been doing. So is it difficult to beat urea? This is urea in our graphs. U stands for urea. I is a nitrification inhibitor. And C is the control. The others are all different formulations of circular nutrient economy products. And I'll point out a couple of key ones. The larvae, which has a really good nitrogen content. And you can see it's significantly better than urea itself. And these 2 formulations of a proprietary extract of the larvae, which also perform very well. All of these others in this zone are also other circular nutrient economy products, and you can see a range of those formulations also defeat the capacity of urea to deliver N in that system that has a leaching challenge applied. So, okay, so this soil you can see up here is the first harvest, that's the second harvest from that system, so after 40 days, and that's the totals. And the soils vary greatly is the point I'm trying to get at. This is a similar experiment in a different soil where ongoing N supply was far more important in that system. Urea N is extremely vulnerable to losses. All you need to see here is that leaching losses from urea are as bad or worse than any of those other circular nutrient formulations. While some of them are just as bad, many of them are much better. So we can do things with our formulations that deliver really good performance and behaviour. Now, to make this a bit more relevant to poultry industry, the findings to date have really backed up what we saw, but didn't really particularly understand in our work in 2016, where we used spent poultry litter in this particular paper. And we were already working on those sorts of concepts of synchronization. We were able to deliver it. So this was for phosphorus and nitrogen, but similar sorts of findings. But now we're beginning to understand that this is related to the carbon to nitrogen ratio in a lot of these systems. And the other formulation elements can make a significant difference, for example, nitrification inhibitors. But we're in a pretty good place where evidence is unfolding that soldier fly larvae and some other circular nutrient economy products can be formulated in such a way that we stimulate biomass development in the soils, where that enables us to synchronize N supply with plant need, particularly extending it longer over time as the microbes cycle through that nitrogen. We can decrease waterborne losses because those types of nitrogen don't tend to get moved by leaching or runoff. We can improve nutrient use efficiency. We can build more resilient soil profiles. Now, what do I mean by that? I want to be specific. What I mean by as a more resilient soil profile is that the capacity of the soil to continuously or in an ongoing manner nitrify and mineralize nitrogen is improved. Now, what that means is if you can have a runoff or a leaching event where a lot of the soluble N might be lost, the soil will continue to generate available N subsequently. And of course, that's tied into retaining carbon in the soil profile. We're actually looking into that issue more closely at the moment with isotopic data, trying to make sure that we ensure that our products and formulations are having a more positive effect than conventional urea does in terms of retaining carbon. Urea addition to soils can sometimes result in priming behaviours where you actually lose old soil carbon, which is really not a very good thing. So urea performance is not impossible to beat. And we have work currently underway to better answer these questions that will help us to zero in on products. Anyway, so I'll just open to the next speaker or questions at that point.
Thanks, Matt. We'll go to Marit now.
I will. Excellent. I will just find my presentation. That will take a little while to upload. In the meantime, I'll just answer one of the questions that's in the chat about the results of the granulation trial. So we have a team of engineers also involved in this project, but they're not presenting their specific granulation trial findings today because we needed to keep it to 1 hour. And I believe they're writing up the papers, but as Luke says in the chat in response is that we're working through our results and what we can make publicly accessible and what not. The final report is currently being evaluated by the department. So my name is Marit Kracht. I'm an agricultural economist at the UWA as well, and lead the Center for Agricultural Economics and Development. And we were brought in to assess the economic impacts of using black soldier fly for waste management and creating high quality fertilizers or soil improvers. So we come in that low cost bit of the question that's on the screen. So what our team did was they looked at two aspects of this project and of using black soldier fly to manage livestock waste. On the one hand, we looked at livestock producers, including poultry farmers, and their interest and willingness to use this black soldier fly technology to manage waste, because we know that it doesn't matter how good the technology is and how good the science is, we need to convince people to actually adopt that technology. And that's where our research comes in. On the other hand, we looked at the end users, the potential farm. Well, we focused on the wholesale market, on broadacre agriculture, pasture, horticulture, cropping, and the interest of those producers to use black soldier fly derived fertilizers in their operations. So we had a team of people involved, including Dr. Subroyd, Dempster, and Professor Rola Robson. And what we did is the typical stuff that we do in economics, a bunch of literature review, bunch of talking to people, in our case, to livestock producers and their interest in the technology and perceptions of the technology, what they see as potential barriers, what are the drivers to potentially wanting to use this technology, and also to potential end users. And those interviews delivered a lot of data that was then used to create a survey that could reach a much larger sample. Now, I'm only going to present the results of the end user survey in this presentation because the survey with the livestock producers had a couple of issues. We advertised it really widely, and it got picked up by people overseas, including livestock producers in the States, which obviously doesn't apply here, but also people who wanted to have a chance at winning the prize that we offered to our respondents. And so there was a lot of gaming in that survey, and we couldn't actually analyze the results anymore, the reality of doing research. And we did benefit cost analysis, so modeling of the potential of black soldier fly fertilizers. So what did we find? We looked, firstly, we wanted to analyze what are the costs of current livestock waste management and evaluate that against the potential costs of using black soldier fly to manage your waste instead. And in those costs, we looked at not just financial costs, so things like direct expenses for stockpiling, collecting waste, transporting carcasses or manures, but also the non-financial costs. So those are things like nuisance cost, odor that irritates your neighbors, impacts on your own health or your or health of people who live in the vicinity, greenhouse gas emissions. Those are all sorts of less tangible costs that are also important. And there's been lots of research on those non-financial costs. What we didn't find so much is actually those financial costs. It was often not clear how much waste management costs to the producers that we talk to. It was often just a one-liner, if it even was collected in their business operations, without breaking down, you know, how much does collection cost, how much does transport cost, how much does this stockpile cost, and usually it was just part of doing business without being specified. So that makes it difficult to compare to an alternative management solution like black soldier fly technology. And of course, costs are really variable between different systems within the sector. In the poultry sector, whether you have cage layers or free range or shed, you know, roaming freely in your shed, the costs are completely different, and we didn't get enough observations to draw any conclusions around that. So that probably will be an individual decision for your business. What we did find was that everyone we spoke to was really positive towards using that black soldier fly technology. They were really interested in the potential, and we show in this project that black soldier fly technology has great potential to reduce the volume of your waste, especially. But there are concerns around transport costs and biosecurity from transporting manures or carcasses, for example, or other wastes to a BSF facility. So we may need to look at on-farm processing or at least local scale processing that Luke can elaborate on potentially. So that's the livestock producers side. Then we also did research on the potential market for these fertilizer products. There are some products in the market already, but they are mostly targeted at consumer, so home gardens, not so much at the wholesale markets, and that is the segment that we looked at. So what we did is we used a survey that we sent to lots and lots of horticulture, dairy farmers, broadacre farmers across the country. And we received about 100 respondents, of which just over 50 actually completed the whole survey. And we used specific technique in economic research called non-market valuation, which is a technique that we use when a market is not yet being sold, so we can't observe what people are interested in and willing to pay, but it's a technique that we use to for future products or hypothetical markets called choice experiments. And this is an example of the type of questions we use. We define a product by its most important characteristics, and those characteristics come from the literature research and the interviews that we did. So in our case, we have the carbon content, which is relevant to a lot of producers, and the nutrient content. So we have that as NPK analysis, and the values of those characteristics come from our biophysical research. So those are the values the range of values that was observed in our product. And then we also have form, because we have engineers involved in this project. They needed to know what sort of product do we target? Fine particles, granulated product, a liquid fertilizer, and this sort of economic research provides input into that. And then we also have potential prices. The prices are mostly based on the experimental design, not necessarily on what it costs to produce black soldier fly fertilizers. So we show people a series of these sort of questions, and each time we ask them, what's your preferred option of these four options? And then we use a whole bunch of econometric analysis to understand what's the weights that people put on these different characteristics of the product. And that's what I'll talk about in the last two slides. So first of all, we found that just like the livestock producers, potential end users are also really interested in this, in using FRES as a fertilizer or soil amendment. And whether it's a fertilizer or a soil improver depends a little bit on the characteristics of the product. So we left that open. We show that because of its nutrient content, black soldier fly FRES is unlikely to be competitive with synthetic fertilizers. But there is still a great interest in potentially using this, mostly because, all respondents agreed that this product would be more sustainable potentially than their current fertilizer regime, and would add to the sustainability of the sector as a whole. So that's good news. People are interested. Then they're looking at that specific choice experiment. We found that most of our respondents wanted a granular product, and that's probably because most of our respondents used spreaders or air seeders that take these sort of products, and providing a product that fits in their. Oh, I'm frozen. Not sure if you can still hear me. Yeah. Okay. Providing a product that fits in the current machinery, lowers adoption barriers, so that's what we want. They were interested in the carbon content, predominantly when it's at least 20%, which this sort of product usually has. And we saw a bit of a split in respondents between some wanting at least what we qualified as medium nutrient content. But there was a group of farmers, the one we call them alternative farmers, that didn't actually mind if it was even a low nutrient content. And those are the farmers that self-identified as I'm a sustainable farmer, or I'm a regenerative farmer. And there were more of those than I actually expected. So overall, I think our socioeconomic research shows that there is potential for this technology and potential for the adoption of this technology. Definitely interest into using it as a waste management solution, but also as a potential fertilizer. So some next steps would be to maybe look at on-farm technology for waste management, looking at the price that this product will need to have to become attractive, and our research provides some input into that. But also there are policy barriers to further development of this product. Not so much that policy currently prohibits using black solidified derived fertilizers, but more that in a lot of states there's just no regulation. It's not been classified yet. So that is another future step. And that's where I'll stop sharing and open the floor to questions. There's a lot going on in the chat, but I'll let Janine drive the Q&A.
Thanks, Marit. So yeah, there's a few questions there. I think I'll go to this one first. It's just right in my eye line. What do you think is the likely mechanism that provides the enhanced drought resistance within the frass? Sasha or Matt?
I've just answered it in the column. So it was the last component of the research. So we're still analysing that data. The plant scientists are looking at obviously plant mechanisms, but when we analysed the soil, we did actually see an increase in microbes involved in enhanced mineral uptake, and also microbes that are known to stimulate plant hormones. So that could be part of the reason, but there might be more than one mechanism involved in this.
Did water holding capacity change, Sasha?
No, actually didn't. Not that much.
Okay.
Not significantly.
Okay.
Not relative to the manure treatment anyway.
Yep.
I think I'm just trying to have a look.
It's probably easier to go to the chat for the other questions, because people have put
yeah, they're in both
questions in the chat.
Yeah, I'm just in the chat as well. I'm just trying to go through.
There's something about bulk density that Luke might wish to respond to.
Yeah, what bulk density of frass was achieved? Are you able to share any information on this now?
Yeah, so the bulk density of the raw frass typically sits around 500 kilos per cube, sorry. But that obviously is dependent on how it's then processed thereafter.
Thanks, Luke. I'm kind of switching between the chat and the Q&A because they've been kind of taken across to both there.
Well, maybe Janine, because it's nearly 10 o'clock, could you talk about where people can find more information and maybe put that in the chat?
Excellent. Yeah, I know Jeremy put some information to the link of UWA's page on it. There was a communities of practice page for black soldier fly. which was hosted by AgriFutures, and I still think that's in their website as well. So Black Soldier Fly for AgriFutures. There is a video that's been produced on this project as well, which has been finalised for release. There's a series of fact sheets which cover a range of topics, including there's a fact or fiction, there's one on environmental regulations, there's one on biosecurity risks. I think there might be one on pathogens. There's one on frass as a fertilizer. So there's a range of fact sheets coming out as well. But as everybody said, the final report is being reviewed by the Commonwealth at the moment in regards to what will be released and what won't be released. So yeah, thanks for that, Marit. So there is a whole range of extension kind of materials that have been developed, but it's just being approved by the Commonwealth as we speak. And as most people know, it kind of it takes them a little while to go through that material. So there was quite a lot of information in there. I think most of the other questions have been answered. I think at this stage, is there anything else on there? Oh, we've got another one here. Whoops, my mouse is. What is a frass classified in the current regulations? That's probably my side of things. I actually have just I pulled that up just in case somebody asked that question. So basically in Western Australia, South Australia and Tasmania, there's the potential under the different policies and acts for manure-derived frass to be classified. This is manure-derived, not from FOGO or any food waste, so just from manure. So it's for manure-derived frass to be classified as a product rather than a waste, which means it can be applied to land in a manner that meets the general provisions of the Act. So basically, just treat it like as you would with any other product and not create odour, nutrient overloading or runoff into waterways or groundwater. In the remaining jurisdictions, frass is probably most likely because the regulators didn't have a handle on the product. So it's likely still going to be classified as a manure because it is fly excrement. So in New South Wales and Victoria, reuse of manures is allowed under the resource recovery order and the exemptions. So again, you can use it on your property or use it offsite with no real approvals, as long as it doesn't cause any issues. In Queensland, it's likely to be classified as a non-regulated general waste, such as compost and manures. And again, it can be applied to land with no restrictions, but it mustn't cause any environmental harm or nuisance. So basically, it's treated very, very similar as a manure. And at the moment, with regulations, you can use them on and off site with little regulation or approval, apart from not causing pollution. Is it classified compost in Queensland? How the pasteurisation will be achieved? No, at the moment they said because it's more likely a manure, it would be just as a what do they call it? Non-regulated general waste. So there is no pasteurisation requirement on it at this point in time. As per compost, you're right, to Gruel, that's definitely a requirement. Mind you, the regulators had never really heard of this before, so so it's all very, very new, and we will have a fact sheet with that in it, with all the different classifications of what raw manures require and how BSF is compared to that. But yeah, raw manures don't need to be pasteurised at the moment, so this doesn't either. don't think there's any. I think we're already 5 minutes past at the moment. There's a few others on there that look like they've been answered in the chat or in the Q&A, unless anybody else wants to have a go at any of the other questions that are in there. None of the other researchers.
I didn't see anything else specific to me there, Janine, so.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we'll wrap it up then. So thank you very much for everybody for listening in today. And yes, we will, we've got a recording of this, which we'll likely send out to all the participants in there. So they've got a copy of this, which will have the meeting chat and everything in it as well, and the Q&A.
Right.
Answers. But yeah, if you've got any specific questions, please feel free to contact any of the researchers or anyone involved in the project, and we'll see if we can answer any of the specific individual questions as well.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very
all
much
for attending.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.